Now we're recording. John Vline's here for GRC. Trish is on a much deserved vacation. So good to have you here. Good to see you. I know it's Good Friday, so I think we're missing people because of that maybe. But we've got great speakers. And but first we need to approve the minutes from last meeting when Donna Linder was here. So someone wants to make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
All right, Steve, do we have a second?
Dana will second.
Okay. You're loudest, Dana, so we'll put you down. So all in favor, say aye, raise your hands,
Aye.
blink twice.
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, and is there anybody here from, I didn't see any.
Are we gonna do introductions? I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, let's do introductions. Sabrina can start.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Gonzalez Fuel. I'm membership coordinator for the Modesto Chamber and just standing in for Trish today to assist with this meeting.
Stephen Quagley, California City.
Guys, go ahead.
Hi, Marianne Cannon, Stanislaus Community Foundation.
Hi, everybody. Jody Hayes, Stanislaus County Chief Executive Office.
Peggy O'Donnell, retired and on the chain board.
Jason Conway, Executive Director for Modesto Gospel Mission.
And for those of you on the call, Dana.
Dana Ferreira, Regulatory Analyst, Modesto Irrigation District.
All right, Pete.
Pete Butler with the National Electrical Contractors Association.
John.
John Beckman, Building Industry Association, and I'm eating my lunch, so I'll turn the video off so you don't have to watch me.
Thank you. Donna.
Donna Linder, Stanislaus County Clerk Quarter Registrar of Voters, and I'm also the 525-5211 member.
Thank you. I was just going to ask.
That's all. That's everyone.
All right. Well, that's on. And we'll probably have some people join us. But Dana, do you have anything to report from MID?
I do not, but thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you. Donna, is there anything you'd like to report?
Is that me?
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody that we will be mailing voter information guides in the next couple weeks and that ballots go out May 9th. So watch for your ballot for the statewide primary.
Thank you.
Harder wasn't able to be here, but Brianna did send this in just so everyone's aware. I'll go ahead and attach it after the meeting. But
Okay. So Congressman Harder couldn't be here today and Brianna couldn't be here. So she sent a summary via email and we will send it to everyone after the meeting. All right, Pete, you look like you have something to report. Something to say.
Oh, always. I mean, let's see here. We just got back from our legislative trip in Washington, D.C., where the National Electrical Contractor Association, we got together with 117 other chapters of our association and lobbied on behalf of apprenticeship programs. We're happy to say that we were well received there and had a good time, and we appreciate everything that the Modesto Chamber does. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Pete. All right. So no one else has joined the call. Steve,
Okay.
you got the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So, legislative year is still new, and most of the stuff that I reported on last time is still in the pipeline. So, but I brought a new one up that I wanted to share with you. So SB 1032, and the state is going to be tasked with setting the Clean Energy Infrastructure Authority Act. And that's going to be, they're going to want to build the infrastructure to help the state reach its goals of 100% clean energy. It would require the authority to do everything that it can to achieve that goal. It gives them the authority to identify and establish corridors for the transmission lines within the state. It also gives them the right to be able to negotiate with entities within and outside the state to establish those transmission corridors. It also gives them the right to sell bonds to finance and develop those corridors. And it also gives them the power of eminent domain to do so. And they would also be involved with the California Quality Environment CEQA. There's a lot of concerns about what happens with wildfires, litigation, mitigation planning for fire and safety, liability, who's liable, the state ones could be liable. And now we know that, Southern Edison and PG were held liable for their infrastructure that caused all the fire department before. Who's going to be held responsible now? And of course, we always have inverse condemnation, which would have brought a concern brought a couple of years ago. So I'll keep up to date on that. Some of the bills I've already spoken about, I want to tell you the update on them. AB 1001. So this is a concern because what it's saying is that there's a development in one area and it causes adverse environmental impact on a disadvantaged community in that region and also in adjacent region, that those impacts must be mitigated at both sites. It obviously can cost a lot of money to add to the cost of the developments. That is sitting in the Senate Rules Committee, which means it's already got to somebody and cross over to the other house. AB 1445. This is saying that in 2025, COGS have to consider natural disasters when allocating the numbers, which means that within this Stanislaus County, if one city were to be ruled with possible natural disaster or something like that, where the danger of allocating those green numbers, they'd be allocated to another city jurisdiction inside of that same county. That is sitting in the rules that's passed over also. That's in the rules also in Senate 2715 organized theft. That is would have to do with remove the requirement. The person acting in concert with one or other people to steal merchandise, and they can be charged with crime. That's still in somebody that's in the public safety committee. And then SB 897 that allows the ADUs to be increased to a height of 25 feet, which is currently 16 feet. That is still the Senate and it's in appropriations. And SB 1038 extends the prohibition on the use of biometric surveillance system, such as face recognition on body cams. And then the lighter side, so this is an interesting one. This has to do with flipping. And so if someone were to sell a house in less than 7 years after buying it, it'd be a second residency, obviously investment property, that they would be hit with an additional 25% tax on top of their capital gains. And then that is reduced by a certain amount over the next 7 years. But in 2020 and 2021, that the number of homes in Southern California were bought by investment companies 51%.
Most investors aren't flipping in 7 years though, or 6 years. They're flipping in a much,
Right. So
it
they
seems
have-
to impact people that just need to move for work or something.
Yeah, that's the concern we raised with the officers. What about things like job relocation or, unfortunately, maybe divorce or medical conditions, things like that.
Yeah.
So as usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me and I can give you more information. Thank you.
Hey, on this bill that they're talking about for 4-day work weeks, cities, counties, they're excluded, right? Because of,
I don't know, that might be a question for Jody.
okay,
We're not addressing that.
yeah, okay.
Do you know about that?
I don't know that there's an exemption, and to be honest with you, we don't think that this bill's gonna have any strength
Okay.
at all in Sacramento. You
Yeah.
pick and choose where you spend your time.
Yep.
Spending our time.
Yeah. I did see that. I think unions were exempted, so that's kind of where and there's another category, but yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
And it's over 500 employees, so it's, All right. Any questions for Steve? Speak up or forever hold your peace. All right, without further ado, do you want to join the call?
Nope.
All right, well, we are gonna go to our main speakers for Stanislaus 2030. Jody Hayes, the CEO of Stanislaus County, and then Marion Cannon, who's the president and CEO of Stanislaus Community Foundation. And I have to say, I got this nice email yesterday. She's a 22 champion of the American Dream for Stan State. So congratulations for being nominated for that. Yeah. So if you can top that, Jody.
I'm not topping that.
Okay, okay.
I'm perfectly happy to ride in Marion's shadow.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
So hopefully everybody can hear from, we're over here. If not, just please let us know if we'll move somewhere else in the room. Our pleasure to be here today for those in the room and those joining us online. Myself and Marianne have kind of championed this effort from the very beginning, and we've been around the community as often as possible talking about it. So if anybody on this meeting would like us to show up somewhere else, please let us know. We'd be happy to come out. We're very We're very interested in making sure that this topic is at the front of mind of the entire community, not just here in Modesto, but throughout Stanislaus County. I'm going to breeze through a couple of these things because I understand that Mary Ann was here with one of our chairs, Dylan O'Leary, probably 4 or 5 months ago, and presented some of this information. So I'll just go through the first few slides rather quickly, then we're going to trade off and we'll have an opportunity for questions as well. So our effort in intent here, you can see our vision statement is important to always zero in on. We envision and commit to build, which is very important for us, a commitment, a high-performing, diverse economy to match our multicultural lifestyles, dreams for the future. This is literally what we would expect every member of the community to want for themselves and their family, is an opportunity for economic mobility in Stanislaus County, regardless of your background, regardless of where you came from in the world. Opportunity for all is really what this is centered on. So go ahead and head to the next slide, if you don't mind. And what are the desired outcomes? And Mary Ann usually puts this really, really well to make it just as easy as possible. If Warren Buffett came out of nowhere and said, I want to invest $1 billion in Stanislaus County in this community in an effort to improve your economy for future generations, where should I spend that $1 billion? And if that question were asked, we want to have an answer. And so this process is about putting together the best possible thinking, the best possible internal and external resources to the county with the brightest minds possible to answer that question for Stanislaus County, recognizing what our historical strengths have been and what is the foundation of our community for generations, in our case, agriculture. So what can we do in this community in the future if we had a very significant influx of funding? Now that's important because you want to have an investment agenda that's actionable right away. So we recognize we want to answer that question. And then the next thing we want to do is admit Warren Buffett isn't showing up here tomorrow asking that question. However, there are lots of funding streams out there that are specifically geared to support some of the efforts that we're working on. So we're developing this with that very high goal in mind, but it's actually going to materialize in what we believe to be funded projects in the next 3 to 5 years down the road, and some even sooner than that. So that's generally what the desired or the approach is. Population scale investment agenda is what we refer to this as. And then in each one of those investment agenda items needs to have a business plan. And the Chamber of Commerce is no stranger to the ideas of business plans. Well, every single one of these needs to have one. And with business plans, you have ownership, you have shared interests. We need to pull together. This is not a government-led effort. We are a part of this partnership, but there's a reason that Mary Ann's at the head of this thing, along with our co-chairs in this effort with Dylan O'Leary and Yamalette, that this is a public-private effort through and through. We're going to go through the executive committee here before long, and you'll see heavily focused on the private sector, who we want to lead the charge and set this investment agenda for our economic future. Okay, next slide. So who is involved? I just mentioned it. We have an executive committee. There are about 30 folks. I'll show them on the next slide. We have a leadership council, a broader leadership council, over 100 folks. We actually, I think our last Zoom meeting we broke the Zoom, that we had too many people coming on board, and it kind of shut down a little bit, which was a great thing and not a great thing, because we want to be able to facilitate that level of interest and participation. We have an elected officials roundtable. For us, it was very important that any of our local city councils, state or federal representatives who wanted to participate in this process would have a seat at the table. So we've had a couple of meetings of our elected officials roundtable as well, where they receive information and they can help share feedback and help shape our conclusions here.
Jody, will that change as elections come and go and people get reelected? Will that
Well, to be honest with
elected?
you, this is a sprint. This is like a 10-month sprint.
Okay.
So we actually, it will be done and shut that thing down probably before before the outcomes of this next election
Okay.
make any difference.
Okay.
So
Can I ask you how's that participation been? You have good representation from all the cities?
I don't know that we've had them all, but we've definitely had many of them participate. And there's been a lot of interest. Mary and I went to every single city council and presented this plan largely through last fall, and we picked up Turlock just recently. So we've been out to every city council. They have all expressed strong support. Their city managers are involved in a couple of different ways as well. So we feel fairly well supported by the cities. We have 3 of the 9 cities who have made financial contributions. We'll flash those at the end here. Modesto, Waterford, Houston as well. So we feel pretty strongly supported. And every time we're out talking with any of the cities, the councils have been supportive. Whether they're have been able to participate in the meetings, we've heard a lot of feedback around how meeting times have conflicted, and we're trying our best to make sure that most number of people can participate and want to participate. So we have a backbone team that's, we won't go into a lot of detail there, but it takes a lot of horsepower to facilitate this type of work product. And we're just extremely pleased with the folks who have joined, particularly the team out of Brookings Institute. They are, I think, just a world-renowned think tank. But what's different about this engagement is Brookings is used to, the way that they put it, they're used to writing white papers and hoping people read them and change their lives in some way, shape, or form. And now they're more interested in trying to take some of those concepts and going into communities and seeing if they can sample the best possible thinking and learning lessons from elsewhere in the country or even the world, and seeing if they can actually move a needle somewhere. We're very, very fortunate that some of the excellent minds at Brookings and their team have chosen to come alongside us in this community and see if they can do exactly that. So this is largely the work that you're going to see that's been done so far has largely been based around their participation and their unique expertise, the types of data analysis that we have never done on our own, nor would we even have the expertise to know what to do in some situations, but they certainly do. So happy to have them as part of the backbone team. And then of course, our Stanislaus County residents, Marianne's going to tell you a lot of information about what the participation has been for the local community here. If you just go to the next slide, you'll see all the members of the executive committee there. And, you know, as I mentioned, we do have some government participation there, but not a lot. We really wanted this to be geographically and demographically representative of the entire community. So this is the core team that has come together several times now and has come alongside to receive information from Brookings and kind of help shape what some of their recommendations look like and provide them meaningful feedback on what some of the very specific strategies might be. And I presume everybody have
Yes.
access to this? Okay.
I'll send it out after the meeting.
Okay, that's great to know. Okay, so next, I think Marianne's going to talk about this very unique process we've gone through with community engagement that's, to be honest with you, much different than what we've done on a lot of government-led efforts in the past.
Sure, thanks, Jody. Yeah, I think there's, you know, 2 sort of inputs into what we're doing. One is really data, and I'm going to give you 2 frameworks that Brookings has provided us that really helped us shape our understanding of our economy from a quantitative standpoint. They've also, Brookings have done a lot of qualitative interviews and focus groups, but more with industry leaders or irrigation districts. They had one with all the chambers as well. So one is really one input, if you will, is a lot of data. And that full market assessment, Jody's going to highlight some of it. There's a full data set on our website. The other piece that was really important to us was the lived experience of our residents. You know, coming out of the pandemic, I think what we saw during the pandemic is that we are a community of essential workers, and we needed to understand based on what we've experienced for the last few years, what is the experience of our residents? You know, what are their highest aspirations and goals, and what are they challenged by, and what barriers exist to achieving those goals? So we hire Debrief, like Brookings. They are really good at what they do. They're a new consulting firm here in town, made up of several young leaders. So this for us was also an opportunity to invest in local leadership to really come alongside us. And you can see it's Jose Boreal, Manny Escamilla, and Nancy Martinez. And so to, again, arrive at this goal of understanding the lived experience of our residents and how they're participating in our economy, they've done focus groups, and I'll show you the community segments they've focused on. They've had several forums, and then they've also designed a community survey to get feedback real time based on the data we've uncovered. You can go to the next slide. So these are some of the segments that they've focus grouped and or interviewed individually, minority business owners. And I'm going to highlight this in particular for the purposes of the chamber. I know that obviously business ownership, entrepreneur, small business is sort of in your wheelhouse. It is your core mission. They've also interviewed residents in developing neighborhoods, especially West and South Modesto. They're also going out to the west side of the county. This is a countywide effort. So, and in Turlock to also understand what is happening for folks in neighborhoods across the county. They've talked to civic leaders also to understand their perspective, and then young professionals, those just graduating from college, seeking jobs or in their first job. Next slide, please. And so this is a story of Gabriella Hernandez. She actually spoke at an event developed by Debrief a few weeks ago. She just has a really powerful story. She's a first generation business owner. She makes tortillas. She got the recipe directly from her grandmother. It's gluten-free, organic, very healthy. Her business is growing, but she's challenged to finance the next phase, which is moving from handmade tortillas to machine-made tortillas. She actually has found a machine that replicates the handmade quality and allows her to increase her productivity, but it was out of her reach financially. So she talked to us about sort of some of the challenges she's faced, and she's out in Patterson. And so her inability to get to Modesto to do some of the paperwork that's needed for her business, she struggled with that, especially as a mom to a young child. So it was interesting to hear her story, because I think we can provide all the services in the world to our community, but if we unintentionally, again, it's unintentional, set up barriers for people to access those services, it's really a waste of our time as well as theirs. So we actually had a donor step in and fund the entire machine, actually 2 machines. And so now she's up and running. But we're going to take her story and have it really inform the work group that's developed around small business to understand, can we develop some microloan funds, and how do we support micro enterprise, which is a little different than small business. So that's Gabriella's story. You can go to the next slide. And these are some of the highlights that Debrief pointed out to us, sort of some of the challenges for pre-seed enterprises that are really just getting going and don't necessarily have access to funds and need just a small amount of funds to scale some of their work. So access to capital is a big one. And then really, just as companies become more established, they need more technical support. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here at the chamber, but I think there is a role for chambers to play with your programming and how you're sort of responding to the needs of small business. So that's sort of our micro enterprise. If you go to the next slide. So again, as I said earlier, 2 of the lenses we're providing, one is around story and narrative and lived experience of residents. The other is really around data. And so I'm sharing with you 2 frameworks that Brookings has given us that really drive the entire initiative. And one is sort of redefining economic success so that it's not just job counts. So I will tell you, most economic development practitioners get awarded and rewarded for the ribbon cuttings they do and for the job counts, right? And sort of unemployment rates. And what I will tell you is we have to sort of broaden our definition of economic vitality. And we have to think about it across 3 measures. Growth is certainly one of them. So absolutely growth in jobs and growth in labor, right, and wages. But really expanding that, understanding our young firms, our dynamism, our gross metropolitan product. The other sort of framework we have to add to our idea of our economy's prosperity is really, are we generating higher quality jobs and higher wage jobs and those middle skill jobs that have really been carved out of our entire economy, not just in Stanislaus County. That's another metric that we're using to measure both our economy and future success of our efforts. And then the final metric is inclusion. Who's participating in our economy and how are they doing? And so really understanding certainly the employment rate, but median wage. So all of those things, the family income. So taking our economy and putting it through these 3 lenses versus just talking about job counts, I think is a sea change for us. I've always said, and Jody knows this, that Stanislaus 2030 certainly is about arriving at a set of investable projects and concrete strategies to move our economy forward. But it's also an organizing function. We should all be able to know what our wage threshold is. We should all be able to recite off the top of our heads what our main industry clusters are. And we should all be able to take ownership of what's possible if we know those things. So to me, it's always been an organizing function so that it's not just the economic development wonks that have this knowledge, but our higher education leaders, certainly our county government leaders, certainly our small business owners. I do believe in putting more information in the hands of more people because some surprising things often result because of that. So here's the second framework for our data. And this also is from Brookings, and then Jody's going to kind of talk about what we're finding beneath some of these. So really, again, if we're going to build a more resilient economy, you know, it's not about just attracting business here, right, and growing local business. We have to really get focused because let's be honest, and Jody said this earlier about the bill you were asking about. We have limited time and resource. So let's not spread ourselves too thin. Let's get really clear and intentional based on data on what really matters. And then take what really matters and leverage the heck out of it, right? So the three drivers of a really robust economy in any community, and this is what we're applying to our work, is really understanding our traded cluster mix, not locally serving. So locally serving is important too. So I sell you a cup of coffee, you sell me a t-shirt. That's wonderful and needed. But all of those locally serving jobs rely on our traded sector jobs. And if you look at the data, this is all available in our data set, over the past 10 to 15 years, our locally serving jobs have increased. Our government sector and higher education and K-12 education jobs, or our public sector jobs have increased. What has dipped below the national average are our traded cluster jobs. So ag, food manufacturing, food processing, they've grown, but they've not grown at the same rate as jobs that are similar to the rest of the nation. That really shows us in one graph that we're becoming and already are a bedroom community. A bedroom community facing increasing pressures from the Bay Area with their commuters. And so driving up affordability, but our jobs locally are not meeting the demand of what it actually costs to live in Stanislaus County. So then more and more people are relying on social services, which is lovely and great, but that's not a sustainable thing. So traded clusters and really focusing on what traded clusters make the most sense for us to build on that are specialized and localized to our economy and our current base, which is agriculture, powerhouse traded cluster. How do we build around it is the question we pose ourselves. And Jody will talk about where we're focusing our work group efforts. The second driver is talent. So what is the talent base? I will tell you when Brookings went out and interviewed business owners, their number one frustration was the state of the workforce. And, you know, we could lay it at the hands of K-12 or higher ed, but it's also a matter of really understanding what types of jobs exist and what types of training pipelines we need to create to get people into those jobs real time, you know, within 6 to 12 months for our working adults. And then obviously producing a better crop of college graduates that are ready to go into the workforce. So talent, we've also studied and begun to understand, and then innovation. You know, we actually are also woefully lacking in small business dynamism and entrepreneurship. And there are holes in our infrastructure around entrepreneurship. And again, as you heard from Gabriella's story, things like microfinancing. These are all solvable things, by the way. But again, it takes a lot of intention and design, which is the whole point of Stanislaus 2030. So those are the three drivers of a robust economy. They're not the only ones, but they're certainly the highest leverage. And then the two enablers are infrastructure and governance. So infrastructure is the state of our digital and built environment, you know, our transportation corridors, our digital and broadband infrastructure. Water certainly is a significant issue, as all of you know, and impacts our economy. And then governance, you know, how well do our leaders play in the sandbox together? What is the health of our higher education institutions? What are their graduation and matriculation rates? Who are they graduating and how equipped are those students to enter the workforce? And then how healthy, you know, are our government systems and our local sort of structures? So that's governance. So all of that is a framework we use for our data and inputs.
Thank you, Mary. So I'm going to talk about this next phase, which is just some of the specific data that has come out of this first phase of the Stanislaus 2030 initiative. And the interesting thing about this data is for some people, it may be no surprise. And for others, when you see some of these numbers, it may be potentially very surprising. It really is just based on your perspective and framework that you've experienced in the local economy or what insight you've had into it. on a personal level. But you know, like the headline of this slide is over half of the county's population struggles to make ends meet, and we've identified are working, or many of them are working, but still remaining in struggling families. And I'll talk about what that means. But we're talking about working families that are unable to meet the basic cost of affordability in our community, while also maybe having a little bit of savings to provide them some economic mobility. These thresholds are, you know, we're not dealing with just the federal poverty level. Those statistics are pretty widely known and so forth. But we're talking about what does it take to actually live in a community and not feel the daily pressure that you're paycheck to paycheck, but to actually feel like you have a little bit of money left over at the end of each month, to have in savings. So you have some level of mobility, and you could potentially try to upskill yourself by investing some of your own money in more education or whatever it might be. 1/3 of the county's current jobs provide a pathway to prosperity. So we're going to talk about specific job numbers in a couple of slides here, but just a recognition that our current job mix does not lend itself to correct that affordability issue that I was just speaking to. So it will take a different job mix. At the same time, I have to acknowledge what Marianne just mentioned, which was when you talk to local businesses in our community, they will share with you their struggles to try to find the right talent to fill the jobs that they have. So those two things can both be true and both be challenges that need to be worked on. And also just a clear indication that there's an underperformance and in the creation and sustainability of what we call new ventures. What Brookings will speak to a lot is that, you know, you need to have, at the core of your economic vitality, you need to have a system that is spurring new businesses and businesses that potentially grow into things that will ultimately support some of these traded sectors that Marianne was just talking about and so forth. That is a central component to a healthy economy. And we really lack there, particularly in the performance when you look at female and minority-owned business owners as well. So next slide is where you can actually see.
Think back to that. How's that rate compared to the state average?
I don't know about state average, Steve, but in our data set, when you look at, and I should mention that you'll all have the opportunity, we've now just posted, this is the first meeting we've done, release of the executive summary of this, the market assessment is what we call it. So I was going to mention it at the end, but I'll mention it now. You can all go online after this meeting and you can get deep into the data of what the market assessment provided. You could read a pretty lengthy report from Brookings that's very, very interesting. But if you don't have the time for that, you could read a wonderful executive summary of it as well. And then they have a data book that shows some of that underlying work they do. The answer to your question might be in that data book. I'm just not going to know it off the top of my head.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think just to answer the question about comparisons, they actually looked at comparable communities. So we're not really looking at statewide averages. There's some clear comparisons to national averages. And then within that, they did look at comparable communities. And they had a very interesting concept around what would they consider a comparable community. And they list those out.
Thank you.
No problem. So here's some of the initial data that is important for everyone to track. Over half of our community are working, or I'm sorry, are struggling to make ends meet. You can see it on this slide. So you see the green segment is struggling in working families, and then the blue is struggling in non-working families. Well, who are the non-working families? You can see it's majority of them are seniors. These are individuals who are not even really in the workforce anymore. And in their current situation, they're most likely on a fixed income where they really struggle to live in the affordability of our local community. But the numbers that are really just jump off the chart here are when you look at the number of children who are living in struggling families right now. 62% of the children in our community. So we have about 145,000 kids in Stanislaus County. What that means is 90,000 children today are living in a struggling family in our community. It's 62%, well over half of them. And then the other number that really jumps off of there is over 85% of them have at least one adult working in the household. these are not families where people are not working. They are in the economy. They are working in this local economy. They're just not in a job or position that would enable them to afford the current cost of living in our community. We're going to go ahead and flip over to the next slide. And this talks about the job count. So, you know, Stanislaus 2030 sets a very aspirational goal. And the goal is, I just mentioned there were 90,000 children living in struggling families right now. The goal is, what would it take to move half of them into a stable economic environment in their household? And it takes 40,000 either new jobs or jobs that have upskilled and upgraded themselves in our local community. And you can see our current job counts. We have 3 different definitions: a good job, promising job, and what we call other jobs. And you can see there's some definitions down there at the bottom. They have a wage threshold I'll talk about in just a minute, but you know, other indicators are health insurance and career pathways. So a good job is described as a job that is paying you on average, a composite average, enough to be able to afford to live in Stanislaus County, given your particular circumstance. In this case, Brookings says that that wage number would need to be $28.58 per hour in order for half of our children. So if we had 40,000 jobs at $28.58 per hour, half of that 90,000 could move into a more economic, stable environment. That's a huge number, and it can seem very, very daunting. The other way to look at it is that for every job we create in our community at that level, a job that pays near that amount, that has health insurance or career pathways, and health insurance is generally also a proxy for some retirement savings or retirement planning and so forth. For every job we can create there, you'll have at least one child that's now able to move out of that struggling family situation more into economic mobility and a stable environment. So that's what this really comes down to. And we don't expect that we're going to come up with goals and plans that will produce 40,000 jobs in the next 3-5 years. That's not what the expectation is. The expectation is that we challenge ourselves to say, what would it take to do that? How do we advocate for our community? How do we align ourselves, given all of this data and all of the best work and research we can do, to at least put ourselves on a trend that's better than the trend that we're currently on? This is about trends, and it's about improving the trend in our local community. But these numbers, while we're doing that, are very, very important. You can't ignore what the numbers actually say, because this is a reflection of who we are. One of the other things I just want to mention about the wage rate is that I think a lot of businesses will look at that number and feel like that's not sustainable for a number of reasons. And I completely understand that. What it's intended to do is recognize that not every job in Stanislaus County is going to be at that wage rate, okay? I have a young son, he's 19, he's working in the local community. He doesn't need to be paid that wage rate at this point in his life. There are plenty of opportunities and occupations that may very well support a lower wage rate for very good reason. But what we're talking about are people who are advanced in their careers and are finding themselves in occupations where they may not have an opportunity to obtain that level of wage rate, and whether or not there's even a path for them to economic mobility. That's what's really critical here. Is there even a path? And it's one thing to be at a point in your life where working at a lower wage level makes sense for a variety of reasons. I certainly did it as I grew up in this community, and it worked very, very well through the different phases of my life. However, what we want are those paths. And we need to make sure that those paths are open to everyone who's willing to participate in the local economy.
So Joe, do these numbers about jobs, are these only jobs here in the county and are not reflective of residents who live here, but, you know, commute to San Joaquin County or the Bay Area?
Yeah, so these are our local jobs. We have about 100, according to Brookings, I think we have about 190,000 or so local jobs in the community. They break them down into these 3 categories, but these are local here within Stanislaus County. very good point, well taken. We've got, what is it, probably over 80,000 people driving out of the county.
Yeah.
We also have people driving into the county in some respect to work here as well.
Okay.
And actually, that's a really good opportunity for me to tell you that very quickly, this effort is focused on Stanislaus County. The number one thing Brookings would tell you from the very beginning is you can't just do this as a county. We have to think regionally, which includes at least Merced and San Joaquin County. That if this were to be done perfectly, it wouldn't just be us here representing Stanislaus. We would be a region coming together to do this work. Because people are ignoring borders when it comes to their livelihood, right? You can easily drive across the county border 10 minutes, sometimes one direction or another for a job. So I just want to recognize that that is something for another phase down the road, that we need to take this good work and then see how it can scale out on a regional level. Okay, opportunities for our local economy. Marianne mentioned that the emphasis on traded sectors really comes through in this report. Seizing our workforce capabilities. So we need to recognize that we do have a tremendous workforce in Stanislaus County and that we are really lacking some of the coordination and collaboration to have workforce development structures. And by the way, the county is part of that, and I just acknowledge that will align with this future economy and even our current needs today. I'm going to go ahead and flip to the next slide, knowing that you guys have these available to read afterwards as well. So here are some of just the core outcomes of this initial phase of the process. We definitely need to prioritize and consider these traded sectors. We need to work on the workforce development systems that I mentioned. We need to zero in on business and entrepreneurial support. So we recognize a small business like a micro business isn't going to be what changes all these numbers. However, any one of those businesses could play a major role in what our economy looks like in the future. So we need to be fostering those every chance we get, and any of that collective ingenuity in our community, we need to support. We lack a shared agenda with ongoing governance mechanisms. So, you know, Brookings is very transparent in telling us where we're not doing a good job when it comes to aligning ourselves between private, public, civic, and all of that. And you'll read that in the report. And then just some of the systematic issues that we deal with that I probably spoke about a few of these things already. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so here are the 5 work groups. So the first phase of the project is concluding now, and now we're on to this work group process. The very first is what we call a sector play, which is acknowledging, and Brookings will describe in the reports, why this particular industry should be of interest to Stanislaus County. And it's what we refer to as vital products in our circular economy. What that really means is taking things that are generally thought of as waste or even an economic liability, and particularly around agriculture, things that are the byproducts of agricultural production that you have to try to get rid of or something like that, and turning them into useful items that can be in a traded sector. So it's really amazing now that you can take certain types of waste and you can build a road with it. You can make plastics with it. You know, we have plastic manufacturing right here in Stanislaus County. Is there the ability for us through innovation to try to link our waste streams with the core products that manufacturers in some cases are using locally? Obviously, we have a lot of packaging that's done here in Stanislaus County. Where can we come alongside and support that industry with what is generally perceived as waste? This is a huge emerging sector of the United States economy and the world economy. And we see the potential to be a place where businesses that really specialize in this cluster in this community. And we won't be the only ones, but we can be one of them. And that really positions us to be unique and special while also leveraging our existing base that we have here with our agricultural community. So there's a lot of work that's going to happen here in this particular work group. Technology and skill adoption in the ag sector. I'm going to ask you to speak to this one.
Sure. This is a workforce play, but it's obviously specific to ag. We've heard from a lot of our ag leaders that, again, that workforce for them, as they're transitioning to more automated and robotic processes, they need both a professionalization of their ag workforce. So those sort of white collar jobs in accounting and HR and management, but they also need a better skilled set of ag workers around the technology piece, everything from running a help desk to a CRM system like Salesforce to actual robotics and being able to fix, robotics in the field or drone technology. So this isn't a, like what Fresno's doing, like a ag tech industry cluster, like the biomaterials that Jody mentioned. This is really a workforce play. And so we're trying to understand with this focus area, this work group, what are the programs among higher ed or, like Bold to Opportunity Stanislaus, what can we offer that gets those ag employers, the types of employees they need quickly so that they can remain competitive and be able to upskill their current workforce. So that's that focus.
Is that something you might go to the JCs with or to maybe?
Yeah, so
Bold?
we're working with John Borges at MJC and we're working with Stan State as well.
So we've mentioned small business entrepreneurs and a lot here. We have a work group focused on that. Talent development is really, it's a reality check moment for us to get all the right players in the room that can really influence how people are trained and skilled in our local community. And it's for Brookings to work with us to say, what do you see in best practices in other communities? I've seen some myself that are very, very impressive. And in those communities, what role does either the local workforce development board serve, which in this case is a part of the county umbrella? What role does the local community college serve, higher education, all that? What role does K through 12 serve? So we're going to have that conversation as part of this work group. And we hope to align ourselves with some best practices that we're seeing elsewhere. These are things that are within our control. We don't need anybody else to come here and enable us to do better at this. All we need is ourselves. We need to prioritize it, and we need the right leadership to make it happen. And then addressing non-skill barriers to jobs and training. Here's the reality. We can do a lot in our local economy to create more opportunities, but if someone doesn't have childcare per se, or other, basic support systems, transportation, whatever it might be, they're going to be excluded from the economy, and it's not going to help all those businesses that are trying to reach out for the best level of talent. So there's a whole effort underway just to address what are those barriers and what can we do about them. Okay, I feel like we're going over our time, so I'll just mention, here's the quick timeline. We're about halfway through this process. An executive summary is out there now, the entire report. You can see it on Stanislaus2030.com. Over the next several months, we have these working groups, the 5 that we just mentioned. They're going to be doing a lot of stuff over the next 5 months. And then in June and July, we're going to try to land this plane now. But after we've landed the plane, something else will take off because we're not putting this in the hangar and we're not putting it away. This thing will continue to fly in some way, shape, or form. But we are going to land in June, July, share it out with everybody, and then make sure that the right partners are on board to make sure that this is a living, breathing process and that the commitments that we've envisioned here actually come to fruition. Okay, I think that basically completes us. And that's where you can get a hold of us. And I want to make sure Marianne has an opportunity to share the last words.
Yeah, just by all means, please download the report. You'll be getting it by email too. June 17th, we're having an ideas showcase where all of the work groups that Jody just went over will sort of begin to share out their plans and what they're arriving at in terms of investable concrete strategies. That'll be 8 a.m. to 12 noon, Friday, June 17th at Greens on 10th. So I'll send that event invite out so you guys can share it out.
Would be wonderful. Yeah.
Is that open to the public?
Yes.
One more slide. I do want to acknowledge the folks who helped pay for this whole thing. And a lot of people have been involved. You saw that literally it's hundreds of people have helped build this thing at this point. But these are the partners that have come forward and actually helped us fund this effort. So I want to thank you.
On your website, is there a place you can sign up for notifications? To be notified, stuff
Yeah,
like that?
I think so. If not, I can get your card and add you to our distribution list.
It'd be nice to have some reminders.
All right, any questions for us? I know we went long.
Well, we didn't have hardly any reports, so you're actually under time.
Oh, okay.
If you want to expound.
I can say one thing. From the time I heard this presentation, a lot has went back into this thing. Yeah, so good job for that.
Is there a way I can be put on the updates as well?
No, Pete, you can't. You know you too well.
I'm actually going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can see my.
Thank you very much for that, Jason. If any member of the group here wants to be included in any of our future updates, please just get us your names and maybe you can send over one email.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank
I'll
you
add
for that.
Pete and Steven.
Yeah, I need to acknowledge.
Thank you.
A very heavy lift, a lot of time and commitment, but for very, very good reason. And it's important to put this in its proper context. We're talking about tens of thousands of families in our community. And that's what this is about.
And not only that, it's our home, this is our kids' home. So like, this is where we're stewarding our community. And what a great job to steward it in this way. So,
Absolutely.
When was this study done? 2019?
This study that we're talking
Because you get
about now.
numbers up from 2019, 2020. When is
So Bookings takes data as it's available. Some of the data is fresh, some of it is 1 or 2 years old. It just depends. And they have had insight into data resources that I've just never seen before. So you'll see a whole mix of that through their data set where the references are.
I was just saying that some of the things now, the costs and the barriers are going to be more now than they were in the past. Including the cost of gas and
I would
child care and
imagine.
all those things, you know.
Yeah.
At least be harder, the rents are so much higher now than they were even 2 years ago. I can imagine what the barriers are big now. When you said, when they said, I don't know if you noticed, said $28.58 an hour, what do you mean? Is that one person or would that could be 2 incomes equaling that? Do you know?
So it depends on who's in your household. So in the report, the Brookings report, they actually lay out about 6 different scenarios. And they say if you have 2 working adults with 3 small children that have childcare expenses, here's what you need to make. If you're 1 adult with 1 child and that's it, here's what you would need to make. And so the 2858 becomes kind of a composite of where that sweet spot is. But you can actually look in the report, you can see, and they'll even share with you how they build up the cost of living.
Wow.
Yeah, and things like childcare really, really change an entire family's economic dynamic.
They say recently it's gotten really high now because after the pandemic,
It's
so
even
many people
worse.
dropped out of it. Childcare, thank God I don't have anymore, but that young group, they say it's gotten really expensive.
So one of the things that the barriers to jobs and training work group is focused on is a model that some communities have really expanded on, which is employer provided childcare. And I know Gallo Winery's been recently interested in this, sort of them pooling with maybe other employers to create an employer funded childcare and provide that as a benefit to their employees. Because 1, it's a perk for the employees, but 2, it actually is a driver for them because they don't have to pay their employees more if they're subsidizing their childcare. So it actually makes economic sense when you play out all the numbers. So that's something, again, to Jody's point, that's within our control, or at least a model we can provide to local employers is employer subsidized childcare. So there's a lot here that's possible, but again, it's not possible if we're not really intentional and we don't understand our data and have these conversations with a set of actors. Money is falling on us, like it's at least temporarily, but there's a window of opportunity that's opened up at the federal and state level now where they're pushing a lot of funding out to communities like ours. And the communities that are really going to leapfrog ahead of the rest are getting really intentional about what type of economy they want to design in the future that's partly recession proof, partly understands the global forces at play at a local level. So it's just about being really smart and getting really clear.
The CERT funds, 250 million?
500
500
million.
now. Okay.
Community Economic
So-
Resilience Fund.
So the state of California Community Economic Resilience Fund, $500 million, which will essentially be doled out largely in kind of a Shark Tank fashion. Like what, and there's planning and there's a lot of effort going on, but at the end of the day, the communities that have this process together the best are the ones that will actually be awarded funding.
Shovel ready.
Yeah, speaking of that, shovel levy, so what role, because you kind of mentioned new ventures and what role does trying to attract businesses from out of the county to relocate here or to build, build here, outposts
I
or,
think attraction will always be on the radar,
yeah,
but I think this process informs us that it is not the
Yeah.
thing that is going to make a difference in what we look like in the future. Building off of our current foundation is more meaningful, I think, in terms of its potential impact, while also just trying to spur and develop young businesses.
Yeah.
Particularly in the spaces that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
That's where they would say, if you have to invest your money somewhere, that's where you should invest.
Yeah, but it's,
But in attraction,
yeah.
not for attraction's sake. I think that's where it's like, we tend to elect officials like, let's attract more business and e-commerce, don't people run out there and they're all calling the same people in the Silicon Valley and trying. Oracle's never gonna come here.
No, yeah.
Neither is
yeah,
Google or
yeah,
Facebook
yeah.
or Twitter or Netflix. They're just, let's give up the ghost.
Yeah.
But if, to Jody's point, you get really intentional about ag biomaterials
Mhm.
and you begin to understand that it's a specialized and localized to our communities. We already have ag waste.
Yeah.
And we have UC Merced nearby for the R&D component. And you've got Stan State maybe producing future types of engineers that could work in that space. And you've got MJC producing the middle skill, middleweight jobs for ag biomaterials. So and you've got talent adjacency where the current workforce can be moved into that type of industry cluster. And it's an industry cluster that's not occupied by another community at scale right now. Then you're talking about creating all of those conditions. And then the county comes in and says, well, we have some natural assets and sites that we could be the home, we could incentivize the growth of that industry cluster. Then you're talking. But it takes a design of all of that, and then you're attracting those types of companies. But just to sort of say, how do we attract business? I think it's about getting really clear what type of business for what type of industry. And it has to meet all those tests. It's sort of specialized, localized, you know.
Well, and the other thing, and you would know this more now with Dylan on board, but I know probably 5 or 6 years ago, Beardland was saying, hey, we can't do anything more. You know, we've used almost all of our properties. We're looking for a new site. And at that time, they were saying, we can't find anything in the county. And so we're going to go down to Southern California. We're going somewhere else. Maybe that's changed now that Dylan is, you know, running that. But to me, you know, that's a factor as well, is when we say, well, we don't have maybe, you know, tractable for even our businesses that are here that are doing ag processing or doing that kind of thing. And I think you look at places like Patterson and Turlock and so forth that have been able to capture logistics and some of that, and that, you know, Amazon and those things, and that's good. And so, and I know Crow's Landing's up there and
1,500 acre business park. That's
yeah,
that's getting
yeah,
ready to go
yeah.
live with some new concepts with the
Yeah.
master developer that we're very, very excited about.
Yeah.
So that'll be happy to be
No.
back here 6 months from now.
Yeah.
About that.
The other
Hopefully
thing
we're
I would,
not building more warehouses though.
yeah,
Hopefully we've heard the last of Amazon.
yeah,
I will acknowledge though that,
Yeah.
that even in this report, Brookings finds that specialized logistics
Yeah.
Can be a great economic feature.
Yeah.
And so specialized logistics generally is not just your regular warehouse job, but it's generally like aviation,
Yeah.
logistics, things like that.
yeah, yeah.
We happen to have an airport.
Airport in Crow's Landing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The other thing I'd say, just as a anecdotal thing, is about, well, when I was here probably early on, before Ellen came to Stan State, I know Cecil and we had various discussions. One of the things we saw in talking to MJC is a lot of the students that graduate with ag degrees don't stay local, because then they're going to, you know, Texas A&M, or they're going to UC Davis, because the Stan State ag degrees didn't help them. They were a different type of degree. And when we would talk to Stan State, they would say, the problem is our tenured professors don't want to teach these degrees that are actually useful for local residents. They want to teach these other ones that they've always taught. So that was something that we kind of, you know, tried to, and didn't get anywhere. And of course, you know, we were just the chamber, but I wonder if that's changed with Ellen and the JCs. And
We're talking to them. I'm shocked to find out that our ag department, our ag majors
Yeah.
at Stan State are in the School of Humanities.
yeah,
I was really surprised by that. And it speaks to what you're saying, John.
yeah,
We found the same thing at MJC. So there's another report that you're
Yeah.
not seeing. I think it's going to be on our website. It's
Yeah.
a talent report.
okay,
And it shows what type of graduates both Stan State and MJC are producing in
Yeah.
numbers by major
Yeah.
versus what industry needs are.
Yeah.
And it's lopsided.
oh, yeah,
MJC's
yeah,
produced 3,000 liberal arts majors in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're 2 of them, not in the last 5 years, but
Yeah.
we're both liberal arts
Yeah.
majors from MJC.
Mine was in general education.
Oh, well, mine was in rhetoric.
Rhetoric.
I was political science, so I get it, yeah.
It was insane, but what I'm saying is, I
Useless.
think, to your point, what we presented back to, and we presented to both FJC and Stan
Yeah.
State, was here's the numbers, and here's,
Yeah.
and the response was, well, our faculty and our professors consider us liberal arts institutions.
Yeah.
Again, there's a place for all of that,
Yeah.
but there has to be a concentrated focus on these types of jobs, and we're not,
Yeah.
so we're working towards that. It'll be, I think it requires.
Yeah.
So the other thing the Stanislaus 2030 does is, yes, it's an organizing and clarifying function, but it's also an accountability function. How do we hold our institutions accountable
Yeah.
for a better set of outcomes?
Yeah.
And it might also be in high school to educate these kids coming out of high school on what jobs
Yes.
are needed, because when you go for a degree, you're a kid, you don't really know.
Oh, yeah.
I want to be a rocket scientist.
I think, Ellen, John,
Yeah.
Stanislaus State, they recently shared with us that previously they had an opportunity class where you could sign up for a program that would help you with the career pathway from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And now that I think they've mandated,
Mhm.
so that they're trying to get students to be more intentional.
That would.
With, you need to be focused on what you're gonna do when this leaves. So what are you studying again?
Yeah.
And where is that job? So
Almost something
I
attached to
think
federal,
there's that.
for school financing too, you would have to have that as a condor go inside before you can actually get funding for school. Your school loans and be attached to like you would need this money, but it has to be used for certain industries. I mean, I know that's kind of high still.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to Stan State and I had a lot of friends that had graduated with me that were at Stan State that were just business majors because they didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I need to make money. I must be a business major, so, yeah. And you're right, people don't know what's out there. They don't really know. There's a handful of jobs, so, but. All right, any other questions? Well, thank you guys for coming. A great presentation. I think technically, Marianne, you spoke at EDC, so this group a few people may have not been here.
Do you want to announce the upcoming meeting?
Okay,
Yeah,
check
so-
this out. We're all over social media as well.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, guys. Just for the rest of you.
Email me the email addresses, whatever.
Perfect. Thank
All
you,
right,
Marianne.
Yeah, so again, if you're on the,
Perfect.
Thank you guys very much.
see you later. If you're on the call and you want to be put on that list, put your name under the chat. And then our next meeting is Joe Lopez, City Manager, talk about the city's finances and upcoming challenges and opportunities for the city. And then in June, we're going to have the new Regional Director of AMR, Daniel Iniguez, and he will be here to talk about AMR and what they're doing and kind of just update us on them. So anyways, everyone have a happy Easter and we will see you next month. Thanks.
Thank you.